Hey everybody, welcome back to Cyber Starters presented by ACI Learning. Cyber Starters is the go-to show where we dive deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity and entrepreneurship with the trailblazers shaping its future. I'm Gerald Auger alongside Ryan Leirvik, CEO of Neuvik. We connect with successful cyber startup leaders to help empower you, chat, to launch or level up your own cyber business. And today's show is the Own It episode with special guest Paul Ihme, co-founder at Soteria. Now, startups require staff to actually own part of the business, right, in form of equity, or to take on workflows and processes with a supportive leadership to own it and make it their own in their own light instead of having to check every single step. Now, Ryan, you obviously own a business there at Neuvik. Have you seen the concept of owning it manifest in your experience?
Oh, yeah. I think that's critical, right? Like there's owning it as in you actually own equity, and there's owning it like they say, like program managing it, like own it like it's yours and don't let it fail, right? Taking ownership of whatever problem you're solving for. And it's really critical in small businesses because once you get started, you never know, what piece might come your way. And if no one owns it, right, the opposite is true. Like if no one owns it, it typically fails. So yeah, own it. It's a good topic. I'm looking forward to digging in today.
Yeah, so am I. It's going to be good. And I agree 100%. Like owning it, you need to empower your people to feel like they can make decisions, innovate and implement things. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay because you own it. You own the success and you own the failure. And that's going to be really good. So we're going to get into it with Paul about that. So speaking of owning it, right, today we're incredibly excited to have a guest who embodies the spirit of innovation and expertise in the field of cybersecurity. He's a personal friend of mine too, I might add. Paul Ihme, he's a distinguished figure in the cybersecurity industry and a co-founder at Soteria, a company at the forefront of providing cutting-edge cybersecurity solutions to their clients. Paul's journey in this space is nothing short of remarkable. An alumnus of the U.S. Air Force, his career there was marked by a significant role in planning, coordinating, and executing offensive, not rude, but on the offensive side, cyber operations in support of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command. And after his Air Force service, he continued his contributions to national security as a defense contractor. And then he went like even harder core, going to work for major institutions like the IRS and JP Morgan Chase. And at Soteria, where Paul is a co-founder, he's been instrumental in transforming the company from a promising startup, promising is the keyword, we're going to get into that, to a thriving enterprise offering a wide spectrum of cyber services globally. Ladies and gentlemen, with a rich blend of experience in both governmental and private sector and a keen insight into the cybersecurity landscape, Paul Ihme is here to share his valuable perspective on cyber entrepreneurship and owning it. That's the theme. Drop all your questions for Paul in chat and be part of the show. So without further ado, let's go get Paul and dig into owning it. Hey, Paul, what's going on, man?
Hey, Jerry. I love that. I want you to introduce me just every day to somebody.
Yeah, no, just like you wake up and that's your alarm clock is me just announcing who you are to your wife. Like, hey, like this is Paul.
Do you know who I am? Look at what I've done.
That's awesome. I love it. Real quick, I see a couple people in chat loving the Air Force angle. Kayla Sturgeon in chat there. So definitely a lot of people back in the day from the Air Force. It's great to see you, Paul. And, obviously the intro talked quite a bit about your background and experience, but this is the Own It episode. And I'd love for you to share, just to kind of kick things off, what your experience was, because you're co-founder / owner of Soteria, but I feel like your path into ownership really is unusual. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about how you came to be a co-founder and owning it at Soteria?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't start as day one when somebody was signing the documents and like forming the company at Soteria. I wasn't there, right? I'm not somebody who came up with the idea or came up with the name or anything. I actually came into Soteria. It had been around for a few months. The business existed. There was some office space that with some IKEA tables and a ping pong table and things like that. But the business wasn't necessarily thriving yet, right? There'd been one or two pieces of work that had been contracted and done, but certainly wasn't profitable, wasn't really cash flowing. And I came in at the very early stages of that. And frankly, I joke around, not necessarily knowing what I was getting myself into. Like, hey, brand new company doing cyber stuff. I know cyber things. Yeah, let's go do this and get out there after it. But we didn't have a very mature formal business. It was still us trying to figure out our space in the world and trying to find our ideal clients. And I came in and was really fortunate to be part of that, working with a great team of folks to get it from not quite zero but pretty close up into a company that's self-sustaining and profitable.
I love it. So you come in, and obviously, as a co-founder, I assume that you make some type of equity stake. But how does your mental how do you perceive the owning it? Where like basically it's already a company that's been created. Like you said, it wasn't profitable yet. How do you mentally engage as, okay, I'm an owner of this. I'm going to drive decision making, because honestly, I feel like as the owner of Simply Cyber, like, I do consult other people for perspective, but at the end of the day, I know it's my final decision, which direction we go. But if other companies I've worked at, I feel like I contribute my perspective and my opinions, but it's not my decision ultimately, whether it's a CIO telling me what my CISO job is, or other stakeholders, the owner of a company. How did you reconcile that, that point that, like, you don't just have an opinion, you have authority?
Yeah. And, when I didn't really know how to reconcile that at first, and honestly, I didn't think about it a whole lot. I think the whole owning it concept is something that I've had in my mind, and maybe not fleshed out or as intentional as that throughout my career, but it's something that I always had done, right? Going back to my Air Force career, you go into a situation, there's a problem that needs to be solved, and I would always just kind of dive into it and say, "Oh, here's something that's not working. Is anybody doing anything about this? What's the plan here?" And if there's not a plan, I would just kind of jump into it and try to figure it out and get it to where it needs to be. Find a way to make this work, to make this successful. So I just came in with the same mindset there of like, okay, what needs to happen here? There's tons of work, right? There's a whole business to build, and what are the things that I can do to contribute to the success, and just go after it. And I've always been a big kind of ask for forgiveness rather than permission in a lot of aspects, while at the same time asking for guidance from our team. Like, what are we trying to do here? What's the goal? How can I contribute to that? And I also just have a great, you know, uh, uh, great teammates, great mentor, and my business partner Glenn Starkman, who's been amazing, and he's always been great at like just providing guidance to me and saying, okay, here's where we need to go, or here's where the problem is, and just kind of set me loose on it and go nuts. So, but I think it's important because a lot of folks will say, you know, like, oh, you're willing to kind of do all these things, or extend yourself, or work through this, this voraciously because you're a co-founder of the company, or your co-owner. And I always tell people it's really the opposite, right? I'm here in this position because I have that mentality and that attitude. And I don't think if I didn't have that, all the time before, I don't think I would have walked into this or been successful at it. Right? It's just kind of something I've always gone after, and the way I've approached everything.
And that's so important, I would imagine, especially in the early days, right? Where you can identify where are the areas that I can plug in. And what's interesting about your case is, like, we mostly talk about organizations that are just getting started, and there's sort of this, two or three founders, one, two, or three, or maybe four founders, founder class that get started, and everybody kind of takes a piece of it. But what's interesting in your case is you have this sort of drive to make it work, and you come into an organization that some of the structure is already there, so you can immediately sort of fill the gaps or identify where the gaps are, where maybe the beginners, the first wave wasn't there. Was that sort of the case? So you could sort of see those areas that need gap filling and grab them and run with it, or was it slightly different than that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of all of the above. I could see some gaps, but sometimes gaps would just come up, right? So
Yeah.
my background, as Jerry mentioned, I did a lot of offensive work in my background. So one of as a young cybersecurity company who's trying to sell advisory and consulting services, one of the I would say easiest sort of on ramps to that is offensive security, doing pen testing. Why is that easy? Because we know that it's a regulatory requirement that people have to do every year. In some industries, it's something that a lot of folks will recommend to rotate vendors from time to time, just as we do. So it's an easy place for people to give you a shot at relatively low risk. So I had done offensive security before. I'd never done pen testing commercially. So let's go figure that out, and
Yeah.
let's go find some organizations that need that. And now, okay, I know how to do offensive cyber operations. I don't know how to do that in a pen testing capacity. I don't know how to, write a report. I never had to do that when I was doing offensive operations, is, write a report teaching people how to fix things. But I can figure this out, right? So let's get after it. Let's just go do this. Let's take the things that we know and apply those and try to fill in the gaps and just kind of work through it with the team, and then solicit feedback from people and get a little bit better every time. So there's all that to say there was a bit of a roadmap, but also it was a lot of, oh, here's an opportunity. How can we take this on and make it work?
And I would imagine that offensive mindset is also really helpful on the business side, right?
Yeah.
It's helpful to go get business, but then in the business side, you look at it and say, hey, here's the matrix that exists, so to speak, and here's where the holes are. Oh, if no one's owning these pieces, maybe I can jump in and do it. I would imagine that point of view would be really helpful in, we like to say the unintuitive ways of, building a business.
Yeah, it helps you kind of see the gaps. One of the blessings and the curse of being someone in this job is you kind of just look for all the things that are wrong and broken that need to be fixed, right? And it's pretty easy to take a cynical viewpoint on things, because when you're in this business, my job is to go find all the things that are wrong within an organization's environment, and then you kind of start applying that that mindset to everything. But you have to sort of change it, and these aren't problems, these are opportunities, and these are things that we can do better and improve ourselves, and taking that same mindset to our business and saying, okay, how can we, like, we did this thing, this part didn't really go so smooth, how can we fix this and get a little bit better next time, and make sure that it's a constantly improving process.
So your background is extensive, but at the end of the day, if I was to like classify you, Paul, you're a cyber operator, right? And a business owner. So I'm kind of curious, like, as someone coming into Soteria at the ground level, and you have someone like Glenn Starkman, who you just mentioned, who has a wealth of business experience, but not, as far as I know, not much cyber operator experience. You guys definitely complement each other as business partners. But what I want to know is, how do you go about owning different facets of the business when your focus and energy and expertise is in the basically the delivery of services versus growing, owning, nurturing a business, making decisions of, do we hire now or do we outsource? Do we invest in marketing or do we not? Like, all those kind of business decisions. How do you, in your experience, how do you own those processes and decisions, or do you defer simply because your business partner has that skill set, just like you wouldn't expect him to come in and explain how to run like an IR engagement? Which would be hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, it'd be fun to put that to the test, just like it'd be fun for me to do the things that he does. But no, I think it's funny. There's some things where we divide and conquer, right? We use that term a lot in our business, right? So there's some things where clearly this is my lane. I can attack it. I make sure that we're keeping him updated, or the rest of our team now updated, and make sure that folks know what's going on. But this is something that I can just attack on my own. I got this. I'll grab the right people, the right resources, and run with it. There's a lot of things that the opposite is true. Him or somebody else on our team, we'll be able to run with it and attack those things. And we're very fortunate that we do have a sort of Venn diagram with some, I would say, pretty light overlap in terms of our capabilities and skills that allow us to get a lot of coverage between the two of us. But there are things that we also just say, okay, these things are going to be group discussions, and nobody's going to run with or own this entirely on their own. So it depends. The other thing, and this maybe is a segue into something else, but it's also an exercise of, as you take ownership, right? I'm going to own this kind of things, but then you start seeing things like, man, I own this thing, but I am not great at it, and I don't like doing it, and I maybe shouldn't be the one who owns this thing. But right now it's a small staff of 6 people, 10 people, or something like that. How do we fill this and find the right person to own it? And that really gets you to that next level of problem solving, of trying to find those skills that can help augment you, which I think is probably a whole nother topic that that we could dive down into.
Yeah, but it's worth exploring now, like especially for those listening, because there's a lot of folks that are sitting like thinking, how do I actually start a business, right? And you've got this unique perspective. So let's dive into that just a little bit. Like, how did you look at an already existing organization, see, where you create the Venn diagrams, be like, all right, these are what we need, and realize like these are the skills that we do need there. Does it start with a vision and then you actually like write it down and go through it? Like help our listeners understand like, how do you do that? Or the other side of that is like, is it intuitive, right? And you just naturally see it the same way and don't need to write anything down and can go and where the vector is. Those are two different approaches to handling that sometimes.
I'm very much and maybe to people's frustration or detriment even sometimes, is I'm very much an intuitive type of person, and I'll work my way through things and kind of feel them as like, okay, now here's something else that we need to do. But in those early days, when you come in to an organization, I think it's really important to just come in and ask questions and try to learn. So there is a wrong way to come in and establish ownership, right? You don't come in on day one into an organization that exists and say, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna take it and run with it, and I'll just let you guys know how it goes. That's not gonna ingratiate yourself into into anybody's team, right? People don't like to see that. So you come in, and there was a long period of just trying to understand what was going on, what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, and what does the day-to-day look like? How can I help? Asking that a lot of times to a lot of different people, and trying to understand things, because you can't just jump in and start making recommendations or start taking action that could potentially be disruptive to the team. But eventually, you see these gaps, or people tell you like, here, we could really use some help, putting together an SOP for how we're going to do a penetration test, right? I'll use that as an example. How are we going to go do a pen test?
Oh, that's great.
I can start kind of like, okay, I got that, and let me start working on it and owning it, and I'll sort this out, and then I'm going to solicit feedback from others and things like that. So that's another big thing to me, is owning it doesn't mean you do it by yourself, but it means you just make sure that it gets done, and gets done as well as you can with the resources you have. But then you can kind of expand out to it. But I think that's, going back to your question, I think that's it for me, is a bit intuitive, asking questions and just kind of feeling like there seems like an opportunity here to do this better, or to offer something here that we're not doing right now.
I love that.
And fill in those gaps.
Yeah, 100%. Before Jerry gets to the next question, I think for the listeners, I'll tell you that really resonates with me, because like one of the biggest pieces of advice I ever got when I was first starting out, I mean, like first real professional job, the general manager of that organization told me, he said, your first 3 months, don't make any decisions.
Yep.
I said, just pay attention to what the organizations are already doing, see where the gaps are, start building a plan, start socializing it, and then make decisions. Now, that was for a very large organization, but what you're suggesting is like, a lot of people come in with this idea, they understand the problem, they're ready to solve it, and maybe they do, and maybe they don't, right? And for those listening, like what I love about what you've teased out there is like, just assess, right? Do some recon, see what's actually really going on, see if you understand the problem well enough, and then start putting a plan in place to execute. Because if you get it wrong, it puts you in this, the downside of this is it puts you in this place of like, well, okay, you seem to know it all and seem to have it, and you start losing support really quickly and exacerbating the problem you're probably trying to solve for. So I love that. Thanks for pulling that out. That was a good point.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Sorry, Jerry, but just like one thing that we've said to people as we're bringing them on, right, is and this is fictional and entirely made up, but I'll use Mandiant as an example, because Mandiant's one of the biggest and most well-respected cybersecurity firms in the world, right? So let's say we go and hire somebody from Mandiant. We're not going to go in and bring in somebody from this company, put them in our company and say, okay, just do whatever you did there and here, right? Because we're not them. We don't, the things that work there aren't going to work here. There's things about us that really work well, that resonate well with our clients, that resonate well with our people, that make us who we are. So we want to bring in people who have these expertise from different places and have strong opinions and have that ownership mentality, but then have them come and learn how we're doing it, and the successful person takes the time to, as you said, Ryan, like learn and understand what's going on, and what makes this place tick and what makes this place special. Take the best of that, take the best of, all their other experiences, whether it's, Mandiant or anywhere else that that they've been in their careers, and then meld them together to create like a best of both worlds type of scenario that's going to work for your team, your customers, your people. And I think that's really important, because I think one of the worst things you can do is just come in and just try to slap somebody else's like successful process on it, because, using that example, we're not a, multi-billion-dollar organization, I'm sorry to say. So we don't have the resources to do things exactly like they do. And maybe even if we did, it wouldn't be the best for us, or it's not what our clients want, right? It's not what they've grown to expect from us. So I think, yeah, what you said, Ryan, is exactly right. Come in, observe, don't make any decisions, learn, absorb, and then start ideating, and then make suggestions, right? And run them by people. Like, hey, I've got this idea. Do you think this would work here? And maybe they're going to say, yeah, that's amazing. Or maybe they're going to say, no, that's not going to work here because A, B, and C. But then that's more, education for you, and more opportunity to learn what's going to work and why.
It sounds, I mean, you guys are Air Force people, Paul and Kayla Sturgeon and others. It sounds like you guys are all tiptoeing around UDA Loops, if I'm not mistaken, right? Isn't that an Air Force thing?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it does come back to it. I haven't thought about it in that specific aspect, but yeah, that's exactly what it is, right?
Observe, orientate,
decide, and act.
Yep, 100%. So execute an OODA loop before you kind of like run head first into stuff. But it does bring up an interesting question that I have. And shout out to everybody in chat. I see your questions coming in. I am flagging them. We're gonna get to them in the second half of the show. So okay, so OODA loop, and you make them decisions and go. I would love for you to talk about, you're owning it. You're absolutely making decisions and moving forward. How do you, Paul, approach or recommend people in chat approach when you own something and it's not working out the right way, or it's square peg, round hole, you're throwing money at it, it's not getting the return it's supposed to? At some point, you have to either pivot or just stop it altogether instead of running headfirst into the wall. But when you own it, there is a sense of pride. There is a sense of, not wanting to own failure. How do you reconcile owning it when owning whatever it isn't working out very well for you?
Yeah, it's tough. You can't tie your own success to the projects you're working on, or the segments you're working on, right? And I think the way that I've approached that is just trying to look at it in terms of how I value my time, right? So I own this thing and I'm very proud of it, and it's beautiful, and it's amazing, but I'm the only one who thinks so, and nobody's buying this thing, or it's not working for some reason, or it's creating frustration, or whatever the results may be. I think the way that I've tried to separate myself uh, from that sort of trap of God, I can't remember the term, but from that trap of just loving it because it's mine, is saying, okay, is this the best use of my time? Like, is this I'm going to spend some finite number of hours per week, per month, doing something. This is not producing results. Could I have a better outcome if I like pivoted something else, and let's scrap this even though I love it, or maybe we revisit it. So that's how I separate it. But the other thing I would say is those decisions shouldn't be made in a vacuum, because the opposite can be true sometimes too. There's absolutely been cases in the history of our business where I've looked at things and said, like, I don't think this is working. I don't think it's productive and a great use of time. And other people have said, no, 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 no. Like, we really like this. It's great. Like, let's keep doing it. We find it extremely valuable. We want more of it. And so I think it's important to get that outside perspective too, because it's true that you can fall in love with your own, products or your own things that you're doing, but you can also, again, sometimes I can be a fairly cynical person in terms of, finding the flaws and everything. And it's easy to see nothing but the flaws and not, see the value that you're creating for other people, and how much they, appreciate, enjoy, or respect something. So I think it's got to be a collaborative process when you make those big decisions. And it goes back to, owning something doesn't mean that you're, standing there alone on a hill, kind of fighting this battle. It's you're in charge of it, and you're taking, you're running point on it. But when you make these type of significant decisions, you have to make sure you're involving other people, other stakeholders, people who are going to be affected by those decisions, and get their perspective.
I love it. Ryan, what about you as far as owning, I say a failure, but that might be too strong a word, owning something that's just not working out the way you intended and kind of putting your pride aside perhaps.
Oh yeah, it happens all the time, right? But the key here, I think, is sometimes the fundamentals. Paying attention to the fundamentals sometimes helps, right? And this might be, the classic program management and oversight, right? What I mean by that is like sometimes, especially when I'm in that space, I sit back and like, wow, this is not working the way I had expected to. And what's worked for me in the past is like, am I solving the right problem? Or am I solving some idea that I have of the problem, right? And you can usually tell by reactions of people, right? Right off the bat, you're like, ooh, maybe I don't really understand the problem as well as I think I do. So to take a step back and be like, what's the real problem? Like in PM parlance, that's scope, right? And then the other side is like, do I have to do this now? Like the third piece is, or second piece, like time. Like, does this have to happen now? And then the last one is, do I have enough resources? Like that's sort of the classic pyramid for program management, right? And I find like when I'm heading directly into a problem that isn't either the solution isn't applicable, or I'm just not getting the reaction from the people, or it's just not working, whatever it is we're doing. It's like maybe one of those three things are out of scope, right? Like maybe you don't have the resources to do it. Maybe it's a really good idea, a really good solution, but like you're the only one driving it, right? And you need more resources, right? Yeah, I see both of you shaking your head and like this could be it. Maybe you just don't have enough people, right? Or maybe you don't understand the problem enough. But the real big thing to me for owning failure is like, one, to be able to recognize it, right? We all have to be somewhat self-reflective as you're going through sort of life in general, right? But also as you're, running a business where you're responsible for people, is having a board of like advisors or like this oversight piece, like that's the number two, so that you've got a trusted team to be like, hey, this might not be as good of an idea as you think it is, right? To sort of tease that forward. So, I mean, those are two pieces to try to keep you, away from owning failure. But I mean, I think the bottom line is what Paul teased out is like, you got to own it at the end of the day, right? Because success has 1,000 mothers and fathers, right? Failure has one.
Yeah.
And try not to be the one, right? Or try not to let it fail. And if it does, look, you got to own it. If it's yours, don't push the blame on somebody else. Like you got to be that person that owns it. But to avoid it, those might be two areas to try to avoid it from. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes failure can just be a temporary condition as well, right? So I'll give you an example. When we started, I was really good at offensive security, but also had pretty good experience with forensics and kind of counter intel type of stuff, based on my background. And when we started, we started talking about doing incident response work, right? And we talked to a bunch of people about this, but one of the things that we learned, and I think fairly quickly, is like nobody in their right mind is going to call some brand new firm that they've never heard of when they're having the worst day of their professional career, right? They're not going to call this no-name company for incident response when their business has been compromised, right? So
yeah, we're in a risky situation. Let's make it even more risky.
Yeah, what could go wrong? Like,
right.
So these guys started 6 months ago. They're probably great, so that's I think a good example in our history where we said, okay, this isn't a good idea right now. We pressed pause on it and we just stopped, talking about people. We still had those capabilities, and occasionally we would get calls from people who knew us and would bring us in. But we had to build up a little bit more of a brand, among our customers. And then a few years later, we went back and revisited and started making that part of our pitch to our customers, and started selling incident response retainers and going out and being more active in that. And it was way more successful, not because we were necessarily better at incident response, but we just had a name that people had heard of before, right? We weren't, we weren't world famous. We weren't like the premier cybersecurity firm in the world, but people had worked with us. They had heard of our name. They knew people who had worked with us before and heard great feedback. And now this thing, is a better idea, just by virtue of folks understanding that we're a business that exists and has done good work. So I think it's, there's failure, and sometimes it's just a bad time, for what you're trying to do, and you just need to like put it on pause and prioritize other efforts that can help you drive towards your goals more quickly. So there's different, types of failure, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. and it's really delicate, right? Just building that brand and that the expectation of people once they hear about you is a really delicate thing, and it could be destroyed in an instant. So yeah, I love the way you're putting this together, because the reality is, like, if you don't recognize failure quickly and try to course correct, hopefully before a client or something, you know, impactful hits your business, the impact of that could be much bigger than just that one failure or decision, right?
Yep.
Especially if you try to solve a problem that doesn't need to be solved, and all of a sudden, you know, you've tanked the organization, right? Like that can happen. We've seen that happen in this space, and of course, all across all businesses, right? You read about it in the news sometimes too. So that's a really interesting element of, like, own it and own any potential failure fast, so that you have resources to course correct quickly. I love that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So hold on, everybody. We see all your questions coming in. This conversation is phenomenal, and I'm loving it. When we get back from the break, Paul's going to start taking questions from chat. So we've got a bunch flagged, but if there's anything you want to follow up on, looks like there might even be a follow-up after the commercial. So we'll see about that. But let's get a quick word from ACI Learning, the exclusive sponsor of Cyberstarters.
You chose a career in cybersecurity, and you follow this podcast because you're passionate about being at the top of your field. But let's face it, not all training is created equal. Don't settle for boring training that leaves you uninspired. You deserve the best to support your dreams. At ACI Learning, our instructors are legends in the field. Our studios are state-of-the-art. We're always on so that you can be too. We're equipped to pivot and cover every emerging trend in cybersecurity. Because in this fast-paced industry, you need training that keeps up. But it's not just about the expertise. Our on-demand video training is designed to be actually fun to watch. We believe learning should be exciting, not a chore. We offer training in every major vendor and certification. ACI Learning is on it, so you can be too. And don't just take our word for it. See what others are saying on Trustpilot. Real reviews from real professionals who have experienced our offerings firsthand. Choose ACI Learning, because support for your cybersecurity career deserves nothing but the best.
All right. Thank you very much. We're being joined by Paul Ihme, co-founder of Soteria, talking about cybersecurity entrepreneurship, but really focusing on owning it. That is the story for today. Ryan, as we went to break, we were talking about, failing fast and quick. Did you have a follow-up on that?
No, I think we covered it, but I'm happy to keep talking about it if
No, it's good. I do want to get to the questions. I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to get those questions or get that valuable commentary delivered to everybody.
No,
so
I think Wading Through Logs had a good post there about extreme ownership, which I think was a good one. See what, looking forward to reading that one. So good post there.
Yeah, I'll check that out. And what's up, Wade? I'm a big fan of Wade. Good guy. So Paul, you ready? Ben's got a question for you. I love this one. How do you handle owning it when you're exhausted? You ever been tired, bud?
No,
Yeah.
I never get tired. I think, that's to me where it's easier to own something when you have a passion for what you're owning. So I would not be successful if I were working at, an auto mechanic shop, right? I like to tinker with mechanical things, but I would not be able to own and have the passion and drive that I do for cybersecurity for some other field. So I think part of it is finding the thing that you're passionate about and that energizes you by working on it, right? I get energized by doing this stuff. It's not a drain on me. It doesn't make me more tired by doing it. I get fired up because I'm getting closer to solving the problem and working through it. And that's not, that's not to say that you don't get tired, right? Exhaustion does happen, and you do have to know your limits, and you do have to give yourself a break and make sure that you find balance in your life. I've got an amazing wife. I've got, 2 kids that I make sure that I spend a lot of time with and make sure that I'm not just in here and on the computer all the time, working on the business and spending time with them. And I think that type of thing gives a lot of balance. But really, I do think the most important thing is if what you're doing does not energize you or does not make you feel more excited and amped up about what you're doing, then maybe you're not owning the right thing.
Yeah. One quick comment. Maria Catina Torres mentioned something great about it. It makes a difference about the people you're working with. Like if they understand and can commit and then show you the grace in the process, like you get the sense of like as that's happening, you're fatigued, you're not, other people fill in. And it's really important about who you surround yourself with. So I thought that was a good call out too.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be able to do this by myself, right? Like having a good team makes it one just more fun in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
As in life, but also having that support so it doesn't have to just be you all the time, and you can focus on the things that do get you fired up. And one of the examples I've used before is an extremely necessary, but to me awfully like boring part of business is the actual business part, right? Sending in invoices and paying bills and balancing all the books and things like that. That's something that I did in the early days of Soteria, and I'm really glad that I don't have to do it now. I'm not great at it, and it did not give me energy, and I did not like it, and it's the worst thing for me to do when when I am feeling exhausted, because it's not going to get me fired up. So I think that's a big part of it too, is focusing on the things that do get you fired up, and then at some point you can't do this on day one usually, but finding people that do get excited about the things that you don't get excited by. That way you kind of maintain that balance.
Or as Kayla Sturgeon, Air Force person, says, you can use Rippets and Red Bulls, I guess. So if you're getting a little
myself, but yeah,
that's a good one.
So another question coming in. I love this one from Itzel Bennett. Basically, wait, hold on. That's not the question I want. Itzel's got two questions. She basically owns a business. She wants to start consulting in cyber. And I love for youth and elderly who are a totally vulnerable population. Where do I begin the process? So she wants to own the process of launching this thing, but she needs a little guidance on what does that process look like, Paul, for someone who's kind of starting out. I mean, you've gone through it already. What would you recommend to Itzel?
Yeah, I think it's generally easier to find an overlapping client potentially than it is to kind of run two separate businesses. So if I were you, and I know nothing about the notary business other than like I have to use them sometimes when I get things signed for a bank. So I may be off base here, but I would think about it in terms of you've got an existing business that you're running, and trying to work some of the things that you would like to do into some of those conversations into your existing business and your existing clients. And this is the same thing that we do even within the within the cybersecurity space, right? We've got going back to our example earlier of incident response versus more proactive offensive security services. So when we made that pivot, we didn't start separately and start pitching the incident response services, but the people who we are already doing business with, we say, hey, also we're adding this new capability, or we're going to start getting into the incident response space. Is this something you're interested in? Is it something you would want to talk about? Do you have an IR provider? Could we compete for that business? So I think just off the cuff, that's how I would think about it. Is okay, you've got a business, you've got some clients. Are there a subset of clients within there that could be potentially customers of this unrelated offering, and then you could kind of pivot that way. And if you're successful at it, maybe you can sort of into making that the full-time business, right?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea, especially like you said before. I mean, you're establishing trust and social proof by doing the notary business that you're already doing, and you're right there having those conversations. Like if you think about notary, I mean, essentially that's integrity, right? If we're gonna boil it down to the CIA triad and take it back to day one, you are doing integrity. So there is a natural pivot there.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you. I'm gonna change the verbiage here so we can see Ryan's beautiful face. But as you were out there soliciting services or soliciting potential clients and talking about businesses, Paul, is there too small a business? Is there a fish not worth throwing a line in the water for? And how do you deal with that? Maybe early on versus later on.
Yeah, I love this question. So if you go to Soteria's website, the first thing you'll see is it says security for everyone. And that's a big part of what we believe as a business. Is we want to be able to serve those small to medium businesses that are otherwise priced out of cybersecurity services. And there's a whole soapbox rant I could go on to here, but just suffice to say, there are vendors out there, especially product vendors, who will not serve organizations that are less than X number of endpoints, right? I want to go buy an EDR. Well, sorry, you have to buy 50 endpoints. And if you're if you're 5 people, then you have to pay for 50 or just not get our product. So I think that it is it's a very underserved market. The part that you have to deal with in that is um, and the reason it's underserved, there is a legitimate business reason for that, is because the cost of getting that new client and then working with them is pretty expensive, right? So if you spend let's say 5 hours on each client in order to get them in the door between your sales process and signing contracts and so on and so forth, and then you get a $200 contract out of them, then you're not really making very much money because now you still got to do the work for that $200. So what we've done and what I would uh, I would encourage people who want to do that is to build processes that are effective but very scalable, that scale down, right? And also find partners who are already working with these types of businesses. So for an example, we do a lot of partnerships with IT MSPs who support some of these smaller businesses. They've already got the relationships. So we'll establish partnerships and say, hey, if you've got any clients who could use cybersecurity services, here's some things that generally people in that client base need, and we can do it for this price. And then you can, if you find somebody that needs it, you just come put them in touch with us, and we'll take care of them, and we'll do that partnership, and um, that allows you to not have to spend all that time and resources and money on that sales process, and allows you to kind of scale down to them. So that's one approach. I think there's probably a lot of ways to do it, but I think that we as an industry should really be thinking more about that, because it's there's a lot of organizations that are just out there and defenseless, so to speak, to both ransomware, business email compromise types of
Mhm.
scams. I've seen several go under and over the years because they got hit with a cyber attack that they just couldn't recover from. So I think I would encourage anyone to try to find ways and processes to serve those businesses, because they need it more than anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, right? Because small businesses later become big businesses,
Yep.
right? I mean, if the trajectory sticks, right? And so serving them at small, you have this ability to sort of teach what good fundamentals may look like early on that can evade, classes of attacks later. So I love that. The opposite side of her question is really interesting. It's like, are some too small to serve? And Paul, you teased it out nicely, which the economics may not be there. So one of the things that might be applicable here is, let's just call it the BATNA, right? The best alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? This is usually on the personal side when you're in negotiations, but there is a sense of like serving a particular client may be too costly, right? Like either then for a host of reasons, right? They may not be ready. They may not actually have the budgetary decisions that they say they have, or whatever reasons. And so one way to sort of draw that line, right, is to say, like, at what point is it better to do X instead of this, right? And X could be anything, research and development or business development or another project or whatever. And I think going into client work with that sort of point of view is really helpful, because when that line gets crossed, and then you can say, look, this person either doesn't have the money but really needs the help, and we're just going to do it because it's the right thing to do, or the time in trying to figure out what the problem is so hard that it's like we'd rather them just come back to us when we can get a better grip of the problem. Whatever that reason is, where that line is, and that's really there is I wouldn't say too small of a business to serve, but economically too complicated, right? And that could come in different ways. So that's the other side of trying to do it all, right? And keeping those two in mind sometimes keeps you from trying to do everything. Right? You got to have a line somewhere, and sometimes, unfortunately, it comes down to resources. Caching is one of them.
And there's been times too where it's like, okay, this organization is frankly too small to serve. If we go through the process, they're going to need about an hour of my time max, or an hour of my team's time max, and like the process of executing a contract and doing all
Mhm.
that is not worth that 1 hour time. But hey, I'm already on the phone. You reached out to us, and like, can I just walk you through what you should be thinking about and what you should be doing? I'm not going to make any money out of this, but and if you're asking from a business perspective, this is not very helpful at all to you. So I apologize, but that is something that we've done. That's not necessarily good or bad or helpful to our business. It's more about um, yeah, I can't help you from a business perspective, but I can help you because I know what you need to do, and I'm happy to tell you, right? I'm not going to paywall my advice. So let me just walk you through what you should spend the next couple of days doing. Here's some links, here's some resources to look out. hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any other questions, and I'm happy to kind of chat with you. But we can't serve you as a business because it just doesn't make sense, and I wouldn't want to send you the bill that would be incurred by bringing on our services. So I think there's an in between there as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's almost like you're in the business, right? So you don't need a contract to be helpful to people, all right? So
Yeah.
I love that analogy because like you get to a certain point where you realize like really all you need is just a little advice on like, hey, set up an architecture, set up logging, right? Have somebody look at it and then push this out to your cloud infrastructure or whatever. Now I've just helped like go do that and then later on come back to us. And now you've helped solve the problem. You don't need a contract. You're already on the phone and you can move on. So there's a way to actually be of high value service without actually, trying to make that business decision of do I need to draft up a contract or whatnot. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd argue, again, this is more of the business side of stuff, but that's effectively a loss leader. Like you're doing good work and you're being righteous in helping, but at the same time, you're leaving that's like a spoonful of sugar in that person's mouth. Like next time they think about cybersecurity, which is probably not their core business function, right? So next time they think about cybersecurity, that sweet, sweet honey that you stuck in their mouth is the first thing they're going to think of. Now, I'm not saying that Paul's helping these people in order to hopefully land a whale down the road, but these things do happen. And I mean, it took 15 minutes, a 20-minute phone call that you would have, you would have been driving and had the phone call anyways, right? So, why not help and develop, you're part of the sales team now, right? Paul. So, I mean, that's kind of sales and marketing.
That's right. Always be selling.
Yeah. So Zivix Player's got a great question. Again, I'll rephrase this a little bit, but the show we're talking about today is owning it, right? And we've talked about own a process and drive it, make decisions, if it fails, fix it, right? Well, what happens when you own too many things, right? Like you own all the things, Paul, and you're either suffering burnout or you don't have enough time to commit to each thing that you're owning to be successful. How do you handle owning all the things?
Yeah, I think, at some point it's a necessity, right? When you're getting started, you just have to own everything, and then you can grow and add to your team. So I think, again, in the beginning, how do you handle wearing multiple hats? It's just a reality, and if you just have to have the passion for what you're doing, and not every piece of what you're doing, but have that vision and have the passion for where you want to go, and that's what helps you be motivated. But then once you get to that point, how do you hire people? That's an interesting thing because there's how do you hire somebody in HR when you don't know anything about HR, right? How do you hire an accountant or a controller when you know nothing about accounting or being a controller? So there's a couple of things that we used in that space, and to take a step back, the things that we prioritize hiring are the things that we need help with, right? So if we've got too much work to to be able to deliver, and we need another consultant or something like that, that's a pretty easy choice because I know how to evaluate somebody's cybersecurity skills and determine whether or not they're going to be a good fit. But then at some point, it's okay. I'm spending way too much of my time sending invoices, or I'm spending too much of my time, interviewing and screening people. We need some help with this. And the approach that we took is to, first off, hire for culture, right? Which is kind of a cliche type of thing, but I think it's really important, especially in areas where you don't really know what you're hiring, right? How do I evaluate an accountant? I don't have an accounting degree. Well, I know that this person is somebody that I want to work with, and then you can find somebody hopefully in your network that you can just talk to and say, hey, can you come join an interview with me and this guy or girl and like just kind of sanity check that what they're saying is not complete snake oil, right? Because I wouldn't know, right? But you can know that this is a person that you want to spend a lot of time with, because you're going to, especially in the early days of business, you're going to spend more time with these people than potentially your family at points. And then finding someone who can help you evaluate their skills and then bringing them in and constantly evaluating them, for that culture fit. Like, is this person still aligned with our values, right? Are they going to talk to customers the way that I want them to talk to customers, and that matches our approach to things, right? If a customer calls in with a problem that isn't going to get us paid, are they going to spend the 15 minutes on the phone trying to help them out like I would? Or are they going to say like, sorry, not paying up because that's not going to work here, right? So there's these other again, these cultural type of elements that you can say, like, this is the type of person I need. Now let's go and make sure that they've got, the skills to be able to fill into these types of things. And that's how we think about it.
Mhm.
But, again, looking at everything you're doing and either where you need help because you just need more capacity, or, once you get to the point, like, here are the things that I just don't want to do anymore. They don't generate energy for me. They don't get me excited.
Mhm.
So let me hire for that. That way, maybe I'm still going to be very busy, but I'll be busy about things that I love doing, and that makes it easier. And for us, I think a lot of that was things like some of those business support functions that, frankly, I'm not very good at, and our team wasn't very good at, and we needed some more expertise, but also people who get fired up about accounting. And now we've got that, and it makes us better as a business.
Mhm. And one of the things our friend Lee Salt from Sleuthkit Labs loves to say, Paul, we talked about this earlier, is ruthless prioritization. All right. In the beginning, you just keep looking at your prioritization list and be like, am I working on the right things relative to what things I could be working on? It is not easy to do. Right. We all fall victim of, like, either the rabbit hole or working on things we'd like to do versus things we want to do. And Lee just always puts it out there like ruthless prioritization. He says it in a way that just like cuts through the teeth. You're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I need to do that.
I love it. So,
yeah.
Paul, you had mentioned always be closing or always do sales, or you mentioned something earlier, and it's very, very true when, especially at a startup, but like you have to own sales. Like there's no way that you're like, oh, that's somebody else's job. Like, I'm good here. Ben wants to know relative to sales and marketing, how much in your experience is marketing through networking versus cold calls and ad campaigns and SEO and all the things that you just throw money at?
Yeah, I'll say that I wouldn't claim that we're the best marketing and sales organization in the world. So I'll caveat it with that. But most of our business is growing through networking, through people that we've worked with and our past careers and things like that is how we got a lot of them. Some doing events and networking locally to try to get to know folks, but over time, that's how we got the first handful of customers. But for us, the biggest driver of our growth has been through um, referrals and recommendations and things like that. And it goes back to, I think I attribute a lot of it to going back to owning it, right? So when we go and do an engagement with an organization, with a client, we work it through. We treat them how we would want to be treated, and so on and so forth. But we follow up and we ask, like, hey, how'd that go? Could we have done this better? Where can we improve? And we don't just rest on our laurels and pat ourselves on the back and say that was an amazing engagement. We build it and then congratulate ourselves. We ask for that feedback. We ask how we could have done better, and then we follow up with folks to make sure that they know, like, hey, you gave us this advice, thought it was great advice. Here's what we've done to get better, like, next time, and let us know if you have any more thoughts, and or if there's anything else that we can do for you. And I think that partially that's something that's led to a lot of referrals and a lot of like introductions from our clients. And I think the overwhelming majority of our business has been through referrals, through repeat customers, and those types of things. And we do a small thing, and then larger and larger engagements over time. So we haven't done any marketing. We're starting to do that and explore, but I would not feel uh, qualified to give any sort of advice to anyone about any of that, because it's not an area of expertise, and it's something that we're still kind of exploring and learning about.
Yeah, but I do love it though, because I mean, there's two ways to build business, right? And you typically see like VC-backed money ventures going hard into marketing because it's less about being the best product in the market and more about having the name that people see and hear and think of when they think of the product, right? So there's two wildly different paths to go. I personally am all about the style that Soteria has used, because it's rooted in like doing good work and having a good reputation because of the quality that you deliver. So I love it. And I think in the long run, it actually is a better plan for growth and opportunity and all that. Paul, before we let you go, talking to Paul Ihme from Soteria, are you got any speaking engagements coming up? I've dropped a link in chat to Soteria, but where can people get some more Paul?
I actually don't have any lined up right now. Unfortunately, that's something that I'm looking to do a bit more of. But I've been doing a lot of webinars lately with the team at Lima Charlie, who we partner closely with. So you can find some content on there. If you go to Soteria's LinkedIn page, you'll find some snippets of those videos and so on and so forth. But that's something, TBD. I've got a couple of CFPs out there that I haven't heard back from, but I'll be out there and around. But otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn. I try to be very responsive there and answer any messages that aren't spam that come in through the LinkedIn channels.
Oh, you don't want me to pass your certification exam 5 stars?
No, not. I don't need your talent search services, and I don't need you to SEO my website.
I love it. I love it. Well, Paul, thank you so very much for coming on, sharing your perspective. I know chat was dropping a lot of really nice words and really appreciating the discussion today and the valuable knowledge that you've been dropping on us. Thank you so very much. Ryan, are you interested in some key takeaways, bud?
100%.
All right, let's roll on key takeaways. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thanks,
guys.
Ryan, that was an amazing show. I loved all the things that Paul had to share with us. And hopefully everybody can see why he's a personal friend of mine, because he's just a great person. From that show, though, from that full hour of knowledge drop, what were your key takeaways?
Yeah, top of the line, you can just see the integrity there, right? It's really phenomenal. And it's always different personalities that run different businesses, and you can see sort of the through line of integrity there. It's great. So for me, 3 things he said really kind of stood out, right? One is like identify the gaps. He's mentioned this early on, right? Mm-hmm. It's like when you jump into a business, you can see the gaps right away. And then when you see them, if they're important, right, in the business structure, like make sure somebody owns it. Right. That doesn't just go flailing to the side of like, oh, yeah, I see a gap, but we decided not to do anything about it. Yeah. The other was own the problem. Right. He spent a lot of time and lovely, like talking through, like, you don't always have the right solution. Right. So my takeaway there is sort of like, make sure you know the problem you're trying to solve before you try to solve it, because you could be solving the wrong one. This gets to the failure discussion we were talking about. And I love that. I thought it was great because like it's something we don't often have in our focus as we're just plowing forward, creating the business. And the last is, the one we all need to be reminded of is like, pay attention. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, that's what I kind of teased out from his piece. It's like, know when things might be failing and own it and course correct when you need to. Those are kind of my big takeaways. Great discussion. What about you?
I love it. Yeah. So my key takeaways, I had one that really stuck with me, and it's resonated because I do help the Simply Cyber community with different projects and initiatives. But one thing he said was, as far as owning it goes, basically he said, ask for forgiveness, not permission, which is that's not a hall pass to just go YOLO and start breaking stuff. But what it is, to me, it boils down to being proactive, seeing a problem and trying to solve it, seeing a challenge and trying to take it on. And that is proactivity. And it really does serve entrepreneurship. But I want to point out that to me, there is a heavy alignment with that and being successful in a cybersecurity career. I say it all the time, Ryan. Like when I'm looking at a candidate or I'm interviewing someone and I'm talking to them about their experience and background, like if they have proactively gone and like done a lab or started a blog or done something, or they have professional experience where like, oh, we got a firewall. Like I have some experience with firewalls. Why do you do that? You're a GRC person. Well, firewall got shipped in. It sat on the floor for a month. So I racked it and stacked it and tried my best to configure it. It was really cool. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this person I can put on a task. I don't have to, you know what I mean? Like it's like a force multiplier by hiring them. So I really think that proactivity and that mindset will serve anyone who's interested in exploring cybersecurity entrepreneurship.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you go after it, but make sure you've got, you're solving the right problem. So
exactly.
Yeah, it goes back to our first episode, like tenacity, right? You got to be tenacious, like go after it, right? But also, pay attention and be aware that, others might be out there not wanting you to do it. So you just make sure you don't step on anybody's toes too badly when you're doing it. So yeah, love it.
Absolutely. All right. So join us next week. We're doing it every single Tuesday at 1 p.m. Through February 20th. Our guest next week will be Deidre Diamond. She is the CEO of CyberSN. She's also, she was an original member of Rapid7, if you've heard of them, very successful company. She has since exited from that. But Deidre Diamond is going to be talking about what the market needs now. And it's going to be a very valuable discussion as we're going through this first season, setting all of you up for success on your own cyber entrepreneurship journey. So on behalf of Ryan Leirvik, I'm Gerald Auger. This has been Cyberstarters Season 1, Episode 5, the Own It episode. Thanks so very much, and we'll see you next time. Be well.
Thanks, everybody.
Value from that amazing interview. Be sure to check the entire back catalog of Cyberstarters interviews for more tips on launching and the effective business operations for cybersecurity entrepreneurs. You won't want to miss our next episode, I guarantee it. Join the Simply Cyber Discord server at simplycyber.io/discord to chat with the larger community and be made aware when we go live. We want all your questions answered. Until next time, I'm Jerry for Cyberstarters.